Hi, I'm Jean Schumacher, founder of Simply Plant Based, where I have a lot of programs to help you to change your health destiny, including corporate wellness and most recently, the pregnancy advantage, where we're helping women to get their bodies pregnant ready. And I have with me today Dr. Leigh Frame, who is the program director. She's integrative medicine, executive director of the Office of Integrative Medicine and Health. And she does clinical and translational research at the George Washington School of Medicine. She just so happens to be standing in front of it out there. Dr. Frame has her Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry, a Master's in Molecular Microbiology and Immunology, and a Doctorate in International Health with a focus on human nutrition. Dr. Frame, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Well, today we're going to be discussing an article you wrote because this really intrigued me. It's titled Processed Foods Highly Correlated with the Obesity Epidemic in the United States. So, wow. Yeah, we do. We have an epidemic. No ifs,
Yes, we
ands,
do.
or buts.
Well, it's not just us, but we did focus on the US for this paper.
Yes. No, it's around the world. Every place that eats the sad diet. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
We've exported obesity.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I lived in Central and South America for like 13 years. So, and I see this all the time when I see people from Central and South America that move to the United States. Within a very short period of time, they start becoming obese. And then the next is the type 2 diabetes. It's a pattern.
Absolutely. And it's not them, it maybe they're the next generation, because that initial generation sometimes still eats what they ate at home. And it's not until the next generation starts to get acclimated that you start to see that.
That's true. That's true. Well, today we're discussing this article that you wrote, and you mentioned that when comparing the U.S. diet to the diet of those who are in the blue zones, which are areas of population living to age 100 and beyond, that's me, I want to go for that too. So without chronic disease.
Yeah, healthily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the differences are huge. When you look at these populations and you look at us. So let's talk about what the blue zones are and what are the differences.
You made the big points. They're living for a long time, but they're also living there healthily. They're not diseased, which shows that having disease at the end of your life is not inevitable, but it is related to your lifestyle. And in these blue zones, we find that they have sort of a unique lifestyle. Well, maybe it's not unique because there are several of them, and they all kind of have some things in common. And interestingly enough, they're all plant-based. Only one of them is really vegetarian, but they're all based on plants, as well as a few other different elements that are really important to just living a healthy lifestyle. They move naturally throughout the day. It's just kind of part of their culture. They have stress management technique, which may include social connections. So family and having a community is really important to them. They have a sense of purpose. So they get up in the morning and they have something to do and they feel like they're giving back. They eat only until they're partially full. There's a Japanese saying called Haru Hachibu, which means eat until you're 80% full. And that's what the Okinawans, which is one of the blue zones, follow. So that's a different concept for most of us. We typically eat until we are full or even uncomfortably full, and then we stop. So that would probably be one we could all take on. And then they eat mostly plants, and they get their protein from mostly plants, including beans. A lot of them do eat meat, but it's more of either a condiment or it's more of a special occasion. So maybe up to 5 times a month, or about 5% of their total diet. So it's a small contributor. And then the other thing is they do typically have, if they drink alcohol, which I think all of them do except for one, they do it in more of a social setting, and it's in small amounts. So there's not this like binge drinking on the weekends that we see in, say, college students. That's
no
just
Jello
not part of their
shots.
culture. Yeah, no Jello shots, exactly. It would be like a couple of glasses of wine with dinner, talking to friends.
So what foods are most associated with weight gain?
So you probably won't be overly surprised. It's a lot of processed foods, things like potato chips, potatoes in general. But I think that's probably partially because what people put on their potatoes, not from the potatoes
It's the
themselves.
company they keep.
Exactly. All the cheese and the sour cream and the bacon bits and things. Sugar sweetened beverages. We all know that soda is not great for us. And then obviously sweets and desserts. They're supposed to be a treat for a reason. It's not an everyday food. But the ones that maybe people are less familiar with is actually refined grains. So if you have a lot of white bread, that's associated with weight gain. And then red meats and processed meats. So eating particularly processed meats, meat's not a great way to lose weight in general, but especially the process, like having a hot dog is not going to be the best thing in the world for you.
Have you ever seen what they put into that?
Yeah, you don't want to watch how the sausage is made.
Whoa. Wow. Yeah. Okay. No surprise there. I mean, those are the things that are going to bang our head and bang our pleasure center. I mean, and make
Right,
our brain
exactly.
go ding, 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 ding.
And they're not very filling. Like if you think about a potato chip, it almost melts in your mouth. So by the time it's gotten to your gut, there's nothing there for it to sense that it's getting full. Though they are delicious.
They are. Well, and it's okay. They're dipped in oil and salt. What could you not like?
And
I
they have
mean,
carbs. Like they're the perfect thing for your brain to say, yes, I want more of that.
right. I used to, when I was teaching chemistry, I make the kids burn them and we measure the amount of calories.
Mm-hmm.
They light on fire quite well.
Oh, that makes sense. It's interesting. Yeah, I remember doing those bomb calorimeter experiments and thinking this was not really working real, but I think we were using nuts, which is probably the reason, right? It's mostly protein and fat, not carbs.
So yeah, no, potato chips burn really, really well. So what are foods most associated with weight loss?
So basically the opposite of all the foods we were just talking about. So unprocessed foods, mostly vegetables, got legumes, nuts. And the nuts one is probably actually surprising to some people. Historically, we were like very afraid of fat and we thought that nuts would put on weight, but they're actually very filling and it's really hard to overeat on a whole nut, right? So if you're having a few almonds, you get full. But if you're having like a nut butter, that's where you could maybe overconsume the calories and you might be more concerned about overconsumption.
Apparently you haven't been to my house because I can have no problems over consuming on those nuts. My
Yes, well,
husband will
it,
be able
it
to,
is. It's easy to have, one or two extra, and you had a bunch extra calories. So you do want to try and portion them out. But I think most people think that all nuts are created equal, and that includes nut butters. And while I am a huge peanut butter fan, I practically live on this stuff. You have to watch your intake because it's so
yes.
much easier to go over and above with calories.
Are you kidding me? Peanut butter and celery, what could possibly go wrong? I mean,
Yes, and then a few raisins on top.
right? Anyway, yes. So a lot of things that you're going to find in foods are emulsifiers. So can you tell me what emulsifiers are and what impact are they going to have on us?
So one of the things that we see in processed foods, beyond the fact that they're actually physically processed and maybe they don't have the fiber and those type of nutrients in them, is that they have additives in them. And they're all different kinds of additives. Emulsifiers are generally used to make foods either feel better in our mouth or maybe they don't separate. So if you buy a salad dressing that you don't need to shake before you use it, it definitely has an emulsifier in it. And I'm not sure why this is such a hard movement to shake your salad dressing before you use it, but apparently Americans don't want to do that anymore. And so they're putting them in a lot of our foods. And some of the research is starting to show that it has negative health benefits or has negative health outcomes.
Well, I can understand. I mean, I look at if it's in the refrigerator and it's kind of separated into
It
phases
doesn't
in
look
my
good.
refrigerator, it doesn't look good.
Yes, that's exactly it.
So, and when I get it, I made it, and I just shake it up and I go, okay, fine. But I can understand from the general population, I think it's more of a appeal thing.
You're absolutely right. And that's the largest reason that manufacturers will give for using them is just to make it look nicer.
Right. Yeah. But it's not helping us.
No. Our bodies aren't used to being exposed to these things. And perhaps more importantly, our gut microbiome is not used to being exposed to these things. And it leads to changes in the gut microbiome. And it's been linked to different diseases, particularly gut diseases. So there's a lot of schools of thought that you really want to limit the emulsifier exposure, and that will make you a healthier, happier person.
I'm going for that. I like that. So you made a point, and I like this point. You said, rather than solely treating the symptoms of obesity and related diseases with medication, we need to include efforts to use food as medicine.
Absolutely.
Talk to me about this, dear.
So I think in general, our healthcare system is really good at acute care, emergency management, those type of things. Beyond that, we tend to do a lot of Band-Aid slapping. We're going to give you, for instance, Lipitor or something that might make your symptoms go away, or it looks better in your blood panels, but it's not really fixing anything. It's not really fixing the problem. The reason you have, high cholesterol or diabetes is usually due to your diet and lifestyle. And if you can change at least one of those elements, maybe being the diet, I personally am biased thinking that's the most important thing. That if you could only do one thing, that nutrition is the place to start. But if we could focus on that, we should be able to improve your health. And maybe you'll still require some of those other medications, but it's more of a foundational approach. And you're never going to fix the problem with those medications.
What? Did I hear that right?
Believe that, but they're really just treating the symptoms.
It's true. And instead of treating the symptoms, we need to get to the root cause. And it's almost always the food. I mean, it's the food. We know it's the food. You got to change what goes in. You got to change what goes on. I mean, there's also those other environmental toxins. That's another conversation. But it's the food. I mean, when you start to look at this and how toxic our food has become, and if you look at since, like mostly post-World War II, you're starting to see this huge change in the food that we were eating. You know? I mean,
and that really, interestingly enough, about 10 years later, you start seeing obesity rise. So while it's only a correlation, when you look at all of the different data that we have, it's a very plausible mechanism. So if we could figure out, doing some actual studies testing these things and showing that it is the cause, I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, to me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, I see it all the time. You see the changes, in health. I mean, like when my thyroid started to go wonky, immediately my doctor said, "Oh, we got to put you on synthetic thyroid." Immediately.
Yeah, and rather than saying, why is it going wonky?
Exactly. What's causing it to go haywire? No, once it starts to go, my doctor said, and she handed me a prescription, and I took it, and I looked down, and there was 4 refills, and I just looked at her and went, "How long am I supposed to be on this medication?" And she said, "The rest of your life." And I'm like, no, I'm not a pill person to begin with. And, to have to take a pill every day. No, it wasn't in my
and it's one thing if you absolutely needed it, but this is something that we could at very least try another way. Try the nutrition first.
Right.
Hopefully it would fix things. And if it doesn't, at the very least, maybe then you would only have to take a smaller dose.
Well, and then my thyroid healed, because she looked at me straight in the eye and said, "I've never seen in my 25 plus years of being a doctor, I've never seen a thyroid heal ever."
But she's never tried to heal one.
Until now. Now.
Yeah.
Because I healed my thyroid, and, it's 100%. It was the food. Totally 100% of the food. Anyway, so how are we going to decrease obesity and chronic disease? I mean, this is a big one. How are we going to approach this?
So it's not a simple answer, and I don't want to oversimplify a very complicated problem. There is more to obesity than just nutrition. We live in kind of an obesogenic world now, so I don't want to oversimplify that. But if we're talking in terms of nutrition, we really need to get away from the processed foods, and we need to increase our intake of vegetables, legumes, nuts, fruits, and water. Drinking water instead of sugar-sweetened beverages. Those are really going to be crucial steps that we have to take in order to eliminate a lot of the diseases that we're seeing almost everyone have now, right? It's become commonplace for people to suffer from obesity or diabetes. You'd be hard placed to find someone who doesn't know someone who has that.
And part of it also too is we become addicted. And I compare a lot of this to the tobacco industry. There's so many parallels here. Like in the beginning, it was so difficult to inhale cigarette smoke. So do you know what they did to it?
No.
They cured it with sugar. So they put sugar on top of it, allowed it to dry, and then the sugar softened the smoke so we could hold it into our lungs longer. And not go like, get this out of my lungs.
Your lungs don't really want that in there. Yeah.
So we coated it with sugar, and then in the 60s or 70s, that they started they added nicotine to the tobacco, so that we've become more addicted. And
sort of like the food industry adding more sugar and salt to everything.
Fat, sugar, salt. The holy trio right there. Yep. Have you read the book by Michael Moss?
I haven't actually. It's on my to-do list, but I've heard good things.
Fabulous book. I read it. I did it in my car, as I was driving along
Oh,
listening
that's a
to it.
great.
Fabulous book. And he's not a food person. He's not a nutritionist. He's a research, journalist, Pulitzer Prize winner, and he dove into the food industry.
Mm-hmm.
And he
There's a
basically was
lot to do
talking about
there.
he was talking about the bliss point and how
Mm.
the issues that you come across, when you start to add more fat, sugar, salt,
Mm-hmm.
and we see this all the time, in the foods. And and it's interesting when you stop eating that stuff, how bad it tastes.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. That's surprising. I mean, as a kid, I grew up with, I mean, not the standard American diet, but I went to parties, I ate cake and drank soda and whatnot. And here's where you can tell I'm a weirdo. When I was in fourth grade, I gave up soda. I said I wasn't going to drink that anymore. And I tried one, a few years later at a party just because I thought it was a new flavor or something. I'm like, let me just try it to see what it's like. It tasted disgusting. It tasted like straight sugar to me. Like it was so incredibly, actually probably sweeter than that. It was so disgusting. I didn't want it anymore. And that was just from not having it.
Same thing happened to me with Dunkin' Donuts. My
Mm.
favorite was honey glazed donuts.
Mm-hmm.
And if we got a box of those, I'm down for 3 at a minimum. I mean, don't get between me and the box, you'll get hurt. And somebody had left in the teacher's lounge a box, and the box also stimulates your brain because you know what's
Mm-hmm.
inside. So I walked over, and this was like 4 or 5 years ago, and I peeked inside the box and went, oh, there was one left. And guess what flavor it was?
Oh.
Honey glazed. And it had
Mm.
my name written right in the glaze, right there. And so I went and took a bite of it, and I started chewing, and I went, this tastes disgusting. And I thought it was, maybe because it was old or they changed the recipe. No, I
No,
changed.
you
I
changed.
changed.
And
And
your
I
microbiome changed. They didn't want that anymore either.
spit it out. And if you had ever said to me, I would voluntarily spit out
Yeah,
a
right.
Dunkin' donut, not happening. Not in this lifetime. But I did. Now,
Yeah.
potato chips, still haven't wrapped my head around. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't. I,
They're
I
still really delicious.
But and I can make them, oil-free, salt-free, and they're delicious, but it's just a phenomenal amount of work,
Right.
especially when I can just
Right.
go and open a bag of potato chips.
Convenience. Yeah, absolutely. It wins out, especially with our busy and frequently hectic lives.
Yes. Yes. And I was thinking about that too, because it's very difficult for me to eat out because I'm extraordinarily salt sensitive. I mean, I can't, it raises my blood pressure like that. And I mean
Yeah.
like ridiculously
And
high.
they use a ton of that at restaurants.
Oh
Yeah.
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 We were in line for one of those Mexican places, and you can go through and pick, ding, 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 ding. I'll take this, this, this. And
Mm-hmm.
I was bored because the line was long. And so I went onto their website. They have an app that you can go through and pick out, I'm going to get this, this, and this. And it has the nutritional information about it, which I
Mm-hmm.
was grateful because if I had eaten there, the next stop would have been the emergency room
Oh,
because
geez.
for that one meal, one meal, it would have had 2.5 times the daily nutritional requirement for salt.
Wow.
I don't
Wow.
eat that in a year,
Right.
of salt.
And most people shouldn't be eating that for sure.
No, 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 no. So I said to my husband, we have to go. I can't eat here. And we ended up going to Whole Foods. This is before COVID,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. And they still had food and, build the salad bar and stuff like that. So that's like where we think about eating out is like we go to Whole Foods and,
Yeah.
or if I can call ahead and say, yeah, I'm that person, that I have allergies to salt and oil. What can you do for
Yeah.
me? So, it's a definite art to learning how to cook this way and to live this way because it's not normal,
Right.
what's
It's
the
not what you
norm
grew up
out.
with.
Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's not what's out there in our society. And it's hard it's like you're a fish swimming upstream.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it is a hard, like you said, it's not an easy answer to a question. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You eat plants, but
Yeah.
you're going up against food addiction. You're going against processed food that people have and places where they're food deserts.
Yeah, they don't have a whole lot of choice, unfortunately. If you've ever been to a convenience store, I mean, not a good convenience store, like the worst convenience store you've ever been to, that's what a lot of people have as their grocery store.
I know. And I'm very spoiled where I live. I've got tremendous amount of choices and variety. And it was interesting during COVID, all the plant-based, whole food plant-based, I had no problem getting those.
Oh, that makes me sad, but I'm glad for you, I guess.
It was great for me, but
Yeah.
for the people who were, that wanted all the frozen processed stuff, that was
Yeah.
wiped off the
People
shelves.
think that's their comfort food. They think it makes them feel better. Yeah.
You may love it, but it doesn't love you back.
Yeah. At least not long term. I mean, there's probably that reward from eating it, but afterwards, it's not going to make you feel good.
Well, also too, I think the medical industry is not helping support this.
Oh, no. No,
I
absolutely.
mean, most doctors.
We're trying to change that, though.
I know, right? Well, that's the whole point of things like this is in getting and connecting with people that do get it, that do understand. But in general, most doctors do not get trained in nutrition at all.
No.
Which, when you stop and think about it, it's like we're talking about the fuel that's running this high performance vehicle.
Right. And also the building blocks, like that's the other thing. It's the fuel, but it's also what we're physically made of. When they said you are what you eat, that was not a weird statement. That is the truth. You are what you eat. But I think the story you were telling about with your thyroid really points out what's wrong. That she was not trained in nutrition, so she was trained to give you a drug, and so that's what she did.
Right.
And you think about it, it makes perfect sense. That's exactly what you would expect her to do. And it's exactly what you'd expect any doctor to do.
Right.
So we've got to change that. We've got to change the training.
Exactly. I mean, she now understands it and she gets it. But in the beginning, it was like I would have to go in with, okay, here, read this article, call me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if she didn't call me, I'd call the office, go, I gave her homework and I haven't gotten a response on her homework, because I'm a teacher. I can't help it. Whatever you are, I'm teaching you. And, I would bring her some material and say, you read this, please. Because we would have these arguments. I need you to do the X, Y, Z. No, prove it to me. I want to bring on the data. I'll bring you the data. So
that's great. And that's absolutely what I recommend people do is you have to be your own advocate. It's somewhat unfortunate that they can't just already have that information and training, but they don't. So you have to bring it to them. And a lot of places are starting to change. So once you find one of those, then you're really good to go.
Well, because you make that point in the article too, that healthcare providers must also emphasize lifestyle medicine moving beyond a pill for an ill. Yes. And we have to get beyond that because I grew up with this idea that I have to go to the doctors and I have to get my little reward, that little piece of paper. Then I go to the pharmacy and I get my reward. I go home, I take it, and it fixes me. No, it doesn't.
Mm-hmm. The same is true for doctors too, because a lot of times if they don't write a prescription, patients get upset. They feel like they didn't get what they were supposed to get. And so there's this like weird cycle of them not giving you any advice except for what they can write a prescription for, because that's what they think you want. And that's what you expect then. And
no, it's true. And I think we're starting to evolve. And if anybody listening to this has not heard about this, PCRM, that's Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, has telemedicine programs. And I can't remember how many states they're certified in, but it's quite a few.
Mm-hmm. And growing.
And growing. So if you want to have a conversation with because not all doctors understand the changes that are going to happen, especially like for the lipids profile. And how that's going to change. And my doctor keeps saying, no, your HDL has to come up. And I'm like, no, I'm plant-based. It doesn't, and things like that. I mean, just changes that are happening within your body that are going to change. And once you do start this process, you're going to be releasing a lot of toxins and your gut biome is going to be changing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huge.
And that's a good thing.
Well, yes, we want those. Because if they're not happy down there,
that's right. We're not happy.
You're not going to be happy. I think of that, did you ever see the movie Men in Black?
Yeah.
The first one when he opens up the locker and, there's the little civilization down below.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like how I think of our gut biome.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And if
Yep.
you're not hailing, they're going to make your life miserable.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
yeah. So, no, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine has a telemedicine program. So please check that out, PCRM, because you need to have a conversation with somebody who understands what you're going through
Hmm.
and to have that support, you know. And then for programs like mine, because I have the weight loss advantage and coming soon is going to be the plant-based advantage. And that's also going to be in Spanish. So I'm very
That's
excited
awesome.
about that with Doctora Maria Jose de la Fuente. And we have done a whole series on what is whole food plant-based, how to begin, and tips and tricks. It's in English and Spanish on over here, whatever, wherever that is, Simply Plant-Based. That is backwards. I got to tell you this one story that a friend of mine shared with me. She hadn't been to the hospital in like over 10, 15 years, and she was starting to have chest pains. So she went to the hospital, and for the first time in a long, long time, and she's in the waiting room, and she starts looking around at the chairs. The chairs are
Oh yeah.
absolutely
Yes.
enormous.
Yes.
They're
Yeah,
enormous.
that is relatively new.
And then when she got into the triage room, there was one normal chair and one huge chair. So there's one of each.
Hmm.
And she sat down, and she's not a big woman. She sat down, and she's like looking at the seat going, you know, there could be another person, you know, sitting in the chair with me. And
Yeah.
it dawned on her that, oh my God, it's
Th-
because we're dealing with massively obese people. And then
I
they
mean, almost
kept her.
40% of Americans are suffering from obesity. So not even just overweight.
Yeah. No, like huge. And she
Yeah.
went on to have a stress test. They kept her overnight and kept her for a stress test the next day. She said, apart from the staff, every person she saw in the hospital was morbidly obese. Every person. She told me, she said there was a guy that was sitting across from her and they needed to move him from this point to this point. I mean, literally like 10 feet away to move from this chair to that chair. And he's like, could you bring a wheelchair over here? You
Oh,
couldn't handle going 10 feet. I mean,
that's
like
sad.
that was the level of, and she said the people weren't that old, but
Yeah, no.
oh
It's
my gosh.
it's really, I mean, if the statistics are absolutely alarming, especially if you look at children, uh, which just breaks my heart because they're set up for failure, right? They haven't been set up for success, and now they're going to have to struggle with that for the rest of their life. I mean, it's going to be a lifelong battle for them, which
It's
is
true.
terrible.
It's true. I remember this one show that this guy had done. I want to say Jamie Oliver. I
Hmm.
can't remember. Anyway, he did talking about food and helping people. And he'd gone to Huntington, West Virginia, which was
I've
supposed
seen
to
that one.
be,
Yes.
yeah. And they paid for the woman to go, please go do normal grocery shopping. And they brought home all of a week's worth of groceries and she laid it out on the table. There wasn't a stick of any
Yeah,
vegetables.
nothing, no rainbow eating in that household.
No. And all the kids were morbidly obese. So as was the mother, as was the father. And he's like, you're killing your kids. And she started crying. And it was all this
Yeah.
emotional. And then he spent the week with her, teaching her how to shop and change. And then the husband, who was a truck driver, came home and said, no, get this crap out of here. You put real food on the table.
It's unfortunately common, and that's the struggle, right? Even if you are committed, how do you get your whole family to commit to it?
It's true. It's true. It is. The struggle's real. So thank you for that amazing article. It was truly eye-opening. And thank you so much for taking the time with me to discuss it.
Absolutely, my pleasure.